All right, let's kick off another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something that's really captured a lot of people's attention, something called the law of attraction.
Ooh, yeah, the law of attraction.
That's right. You know, that idea that what you think about, you attract into your life.
Yeah, like your thoughts can shape your reality, right?
That's it. And, the secret really made it a household term back in the day. And since then, so many people are convinced that it really
Oh,
works.
yeah, tons of folks swear by it.
But, our listeners, always thinking critically, wanting to go deeper,
Absolutely.
and they're probably wondering, is there really some science behind this? Or is it just, wishful thinking? And that's
Well,
exactly what we're going to explore.
we're going to unpack it all, get to the bottom of
To
it.
get to the bottom of it. So, to help us do that, we've got some really cool sources lined up today.
Yeah, we do. We've got a nice mix, actually.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about them.
All right, so we've got excerpts from this Forbes article, The Mystery and Science Behind the Law of Attraction by Avinash Anand Singh.
Nice.
We've also got a blog post by Nathan, who's a Law of Attraction life coach, titled The Science Behind the Law of Attraction, How Positive Thinking Shapes Your Reality.
So we're getting the pro LOA perspective there.
We are. But to make sure we're getting a balanced view, we're also looking at The Truth About the Law of Attraction from Psychology Today, Dr. Neil Farber.
So we've got those different sides of the coin, which is great.
Exactly. Got to have both sides.
So it sounds like we're going to be exploring those who are really enthusiastic about the LOA and those who might be a bit more skeptical.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting exploration to see, where the truth lies or if there's maybe a middle ground.
Definitely. And where should we start? I mean, where does this whole law of attraction thing even come from?
Well, a lot of the early buzz, I think, came from people's personal stories, anecdotes about how they supposedly manifested their
Oh,
desires.
yeah, those stories. You hear them all the time.
Right. Like in that Forbes article, Avinash Anand Singh, the author, he talks about how he visualized winning the Best All-Rounder award at his graduation.
Oh, did he?
And you know what he did? He actually won. And he got a $1,500 prize with it, too.
Oh, see? It works.
Those are the kinds of stories that really grab people's attention. I mean, who wouldn't want to manifest their desires like that?
I know, right? It's so compelling.
It is.
And I'm sure, a lot of our listeners have probably had those moments where they were focused on something they wanted and then bam, it just shows up.
Yeah, it's like magic almost.
Right. But like you said earlier, we want to look at this with a bit more scrutiny.
Yeah, we're not just taking anecdotes at face value. We want to know, is there something more to it?
So how do those personal experience, the anecdotes and the stories, how do they line up with what we know about the brain? Like what's the science saying?
That's where things get really interesting because, there are actually some scientific concepts that seem to connect with the law of attraction. Yeah. And Nathan, the LOA life coach, he dives into a few of them in his blog post.
Okay, so what's he got for us?
Well, he starts with this thing called the reticular activating system, or RAS.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Have you ever noticed, like, when you're thinking about buying a certain type of car,
Uh-huh.
you suddenly start seeing that car everywhere you go?
Oh, yeah, yeah. All the time. It's like my brain suddenly tuned into that specific make and model.
Exactly. And that's basically your RAS doing its thing. It's this network of neurons in your brain, and it basically acts like a filter, deciding what you pay attention to out of all the information that's bombarding your senses.
Oh, I see. So it's like our brains are filtering out the irrelevant stuff and focusing on what we're thinking about.
Right. So if you're thinking about attracting wealth, your RAS might start to pick up on financial opportunities that you might have missed otherwise.
Okay, so it's not that the opportunities weren't there before, it's just that our brains weren't tuned in to see them.
That's the idea. Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating. Are there any other brain things that could be playing a role in this law of attraction stuff?
There are. There
Yeah.
are. Nathan also talks about neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. Okay, and what's that all about?
It's your brain's ability to uh, basically rewire itself based on your thoughts and actions.
So, like, our brains are constantly changing and adapting?
Yeah, exactly. Like, think of it this way. You know those paths in the woods? The more you walk on them, the more defined they become.
Yeah, I get.
It's kind of like that with your brain. The more you think certain thoughts, the stronger the connections become your brain. So if you're always picturing yourself being successful, your brain might actually be strengthening those neural pathways that are connected to achieving that success.
Oh, wow. So it's not just like positive thinking, it's actually changing our brains physically.
It seems that way, yeah, which is pretty incredible when you think about it.
It really is. So it sounds like we've got some pretty solid science supporting at least some aspects of the law of attraction.
Yeah, it's looking that way. But remember, we also have Dr. Farber's article from Psychology Today, which takes a more critical stance.
Oh, right, right. So what does he have to say about all this?
Well, he basically argues that the law of attraction, as it's often presented, isn't really backed up by solid science.
Interesting. So he's not buying it?
Not entirely. He even calls it metaphysical pseudoscience, which, are pretty strong words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are some fighting words. What specifically doesn't he like about it?
Well, for one, he says that some of the people who talk about the law of attraction make claims that are, well, just straight up scientifically inaccurate.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so for instance, there are some who say that electrons have a positive charge, which, if you've ever taken a basic physics class, you know that's not true.
Yeah, that's definitely not how electrons work.
And he's concerned that they're kind of twisting those scientific ideas to fit their narrative.
So he's worried that they're misusing the science to support their claims.
I think that's a big part of his argument, yeah. And it's not just about the science itself. He's also worried about, the potential harm that could come from relying solely on the law of attraction.
Okay, so now I'm really intrigued. What kind of harm are we talking about here?
Well, um, one of his big concerns is this idea of blaming the victim.
Blaming the victim.
Yeah, he's saying that, it's not right to suggest that people are completely responsible for all the bad things that happen in their lives.
Oh, I see. So, like if someone gets sick or they have an accident or something even worse, he's saying it's not fair to just blame their thoughts for it.
Exactly, exactly. And he brings up a good point. I mean, there are so many factors outside of our control. You can't just say, oh, well, you must have been thinking negative thoughts, and that's why this bad thing happened.
Yeah, that seems like a dangerous oversimplification.
Right. It's like putting all the responsibility on the individual, which can be really damaging.
So he's concerned about the psychological impact of all this blame.
Absolutely. He thinks it could lead to a lot of guilt and shame and even a sense of helplessness.
That makes sense. And ironically, doesn't the law of attraction emphasize positive thinking? So it's like a contradiction.
Exactly. If you're constantly blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong,
Yeah.
it's going to be pretty hard to stay positive, right?
Right. That's a good point. So, where do we go from here? We've got some science that seems to support the law of attraction, but then we have these pretty serious criticisms. How do we make sense of it all? How do we reconcile these different viewpoints?
Well, I think a key is finding a balanced perspective.
Balanced perspective. Okay.
Yeah, because, positive thinking is important. I think we can all agree on that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it's not like a magic wand you can wave and suddenly, poof, everything you want appears.
Right. You can't just sit around visualizing your dream life and expect it to fall into your lap.
Exactly. You still need to put in the work.
Yeah.
You need to take action and put in the effort to achieve your goals.
Yeah, I guess it's about finding that balance between harnessing the power of your thoughts and actually, getting off the couch and doing something.
Exactly. And remembering that some things are just beyond your control.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, how do we do that? How do we find that balance, that middle ground?
Well, I think understanding the science a little deeper can be really helpful. Like, remember we were talking about neuroplasticity before?
Yeah, the brain rewiring itself.
Right, right. And we were talking about how it can help you build those pathways for success, but it's important to remember that it goes both ways. If you're constantly feeding your brain negative thoughts or engaging in behaviors that sabotage you, guess what? You're strengthening those pathways too.
So, you're saying that if we keep thinking, I can't do this or I'm not good enough, we're actually making it more likely that we'll fail.
I hate to say it, but yeah, that's how it works.
So, how do we break that cycle?
It all starts with becoming more aware of your thoughts, paying attention to those thought patterns and making a conscious effort to cultivate a more positive mindset.
So, it's not about ignoring the negative thoughts completely, because that's impossible, right?
Right. It's more about recognizing them when they pop up and then making a choice to focus on something more positive.
So, it's like, okay, I hear you, negative thought, but I'm not going to give you my energy.
You got it. And you can even try reframing those negative thoughts. Look for a more positive spin. So instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, maybe try saying, I'm still learning and I'm committed to getting better.
That's a good one. That shifts the focus from like self-criticism to growth.
Exactly, exactly. And the more you practice redirecting those thoughts, the easier it becomes. You're literally rewiring your brain for positivity.
I love that. So we've got visualization to help us prime our RAS. We've got thought reframing to handle the negativity. Anything else we can add to our toolkit?
Well, Dr. Farber brought up a good point about anecdotal evidence, how it can be misleading.
Yeah, those stories can be so compelling, but they're not always reliable, right?
Right. And you talk about confirmation bias, how it can make us see what we want to see, even if it's not really there.
Oh, yeah, like when you're convinced something's true, and then you only pay attention to the evidence that supports your belief.
Exactly, exactly. And he mentioned another thing called apophenia, which is our tendency to see patterns in random events.
Like seeing the number 11 everywhere you look after someone mentions it.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And while it's fun to think those things are connected to the law of attraction, maybe we're just seeing what we want to see.
So a healthy dose of skepticism is in order.
Absolutely. Don't just take things at face value. Question them, analyze them, see if they hold up to scrutiny.
Okay, critical thinking is key. What about the placebo effect? We talked about that earlier, how it seemed to support the law of attraction. I bet Dr. Farber has something to say about that too.
You bet he does. He acknowledges that the placebo effect is powerful, but he doesn't think it necessarily validates the LOA as some sort of universal law.
So belief is powerful, but it doesn't mean our thoughts are literally creating reality.
Exactly. And that's why taking action is so important. One of the criticisms of the law of attraction is that it can lead to, well, passivity.
So instead of actually doing something, people are just sitting around visualizing their dreams and waiting for them to magically appear.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the fantasy and forget to take concrete steps.
Right. It's like they say, vision without action is just a daydream.
Perfect way to put it. So you got to translate those visions into actionable steps, break those big goals down into smaller tasks, create a plan, set some deadlines, and hold yourself accountable.
So maybe it's not about the law of attraction being some mystical force, but about using these techniques, whether you believe in the LOA or not, to get yourself in the right mindset and take effective action.
I think that's a great way to look at it. A lot of what's attributed to the LOA is actually just good practice for personal growth, period.
Makes sense to me. Okay, so we've talked about visualization, thought reframing, setting goals, making a plan. Is there anything else we should be keeping in mind?
Well, Nathan mentions one more thing in his blog post that I think is really interesting.
Lay it on me.
It's called the Pygmalion effect. It's the idea that other people's expectations of us can actually influence our behavior and our success.
Oh, I think I've heard of that. Like, if a teacher believes a student is capable of great things, that student is more likely to perform well.
Exactly. And this ties into the law of attraction. The idea that confidence and positive thinking can lead to greater support from others. If you believe in yourself, other people are more likely to believe in you too.
It's like a positive feedback loop. The more you believe in yourself, the more others believe in you, which just reinforces your confidence and makes you even more likely to succeed.
You got it.
But like with neuroplasticity, I bet this can work both ways too, right?
Absolutely. If you're surrounded by negativity and doubt, it can be tough to stay positive and reach your goals.
So choose your company wisely.
Right. Couldn't have said it better myself. The people you surround yourself with can have a huge impact on your mindset and your ability to achieve what you want.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've talked about personal stories, the science, the criticisms, all those different perspectives.
It's been a wild ride.
It really has. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question. If you could design your own law of attraction, what would it look like? How would you balance the power of positive thinking with the importance of action and responsibility? Share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #MyLawOfAttraction.
That's a great question. Really gets you thinking about what matters most when it comes to making those dreams a reality.
And that's what we're all about here, right? Helping our listeners to explore, to question, and to create the lives they desire.
Absolutely. It's all about empowerment.
So until next time, keep those minds curious and those spirits adventurous. We'll see you on our next deep dive. It's amazing how much ground we covered, just talking about the law of attraction.
I know, right? It's a lot to unpack.
We started with this exciting idea like, oh, your thoughts become things. But now, it feels like we have a much deeper understanding of how our thoughts actually maybe play a role in shaping our reality.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
An onion, that's a good one.
Starting with those juicy anecdotes, then we dug into the science, both the stuff that seems to support it and the criticisms. And then finally, we kind of landed on, okay, how do we actually use this
Right.
stuff?
How do we actually apply it to our lives, regardless of whether we fully buy into the LOA as this universal law or not?
Exactly.
And I think that's what's so helpful for our listener. They come to us wanting to know, does it work? Does this law of attraction thing actually work? And I think the answer, like with a lot of things in life, isn't a simple yes or no.
It's way more complicated than that. It's more about understanding all the different aspects, the good and the bad, the potential benefits and the potential downsides.
Yeah, yeah. It's about taking control of your own journey,
Right.
right? Trying different things and figuring out what works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's your life, your path.
It reminds me of that quote, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. The more we explore and learn, the more we realize there's always more to discover.
I love that.
And that's kind of exciting, right?
Oh, absolutely. It keeps things interesting.
It does. It does. It's all about staying curious, challenging what we think we know, and being open to different ways of looking at things.
You got it.
And maybe sometimes it's about letting go of needing all the answers and just enjoying the ride, the journey of exploration.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this fascinating and sometimes confusing world of the law of attraction. We hope you've gotten something out of it, maybe even a new sense of what's possible.
I hope so.
Just remember, it's your life, your journey. Keep those minds curious, keep those spirits adventurous, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.